Hey, good morning, everybody. I'm pleased to welcome you all to the Safe Routes Academy. My name is Bill Riviere, and I am the State Safe Routes to School Coordinator from the New Jersey Department of Transportation's Bureau of Safety, Bicycle, and Pedestrian Programs. The Safe Routes Academy features hands-on interactive sessions to help participants make their communities more walk and bike friendly for all users of all ages and abilities. I'd like to thank the New Jersey Bike and Walk Coalition for their partnership in helping us to bring this Safe Routes Academy session to you. Now, before we get started, I do have a couple of housekeeping details. First, this session is being recorded, and after the summit, the recordings of this and all the other Academy sessions will be made available on the New Jersey Bike and Walk Coalition and the New Jersey Safe Routes websites. Second, in order to move today's session along, we'd like everyone to use the Q&A function for questions. This Safe Routes Academy session is titled Fund Your Project, Tips and Strategies for Successful Grant Applications, and presenters will discuss strategies and funding opportunities available for communities to implement a range of improvements to make walking and bicycling safer, easier, and more acceptable. We'll begin with Trish Sanchez from the New Jersey Safe Routes Resource Center at Rutgers University, who will begin with a quick introduction to the session. Next, Julie Seaman from NJDOT's Division Office of the Local Aid and Economic Development will give an overview of the division and how they work collaboratively with local communities and public agencies to navigate the federal grant process. Then we'll move back to Trish, who'll talk about a number of funding types from larger federal and state grants to smaller sustainable community grants, as well as some tips and strategies for developing successful grant applications. And lastly, but not leastly, Christine Newman, Director of Community Outreach for AARP New Jersey, will talk about their community challenge grants for projects that help people travel safely within their communities, including walking and bicycling. Now, I'll turn it over to Advocate Extraordinaire, Trish the Sanchez.
Wow, thank you, Bill. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this lovely Friday, which is our last session for the Safe Routes Academy. I'm going to share my screen and hopefully you'll all see it. As Bill mentioned, today, this session is Fund Your Project. Again, I'm Trish Sanchez from the New Jersey Safe Routes to School Resource Center at Rutgers University, and our center is funded by the New Jersey Department of Transportation. So let's move on. If you have attended our previous Safe Routes Academy sessions, we'd like to kick off with a quick poll. So Leanne, will you click off the check? There's the poll. Have you applied for grant funding for any bike or pedestrian projects in the past? Click yes if you were awarded the grant. Yes, but was not awarded the grant. No, because you weren't aware of the funding. No, because you weren't sure how to get started. Or other, and if you have an other, can you please let us know in chat? All right, Leanne, how are we doing? I think we are almost there.
Pretty good. We have almost everyone now. I'm going to give it another few seconds.
Okay.
I think that's everyone. So I'm going to end polling.
Okay.
There we go, sharing the results. Wow, we have a lot of other. So it would be really great if people could please send us a note in Q&A or about what you mean by other. We'd love to know because we can talk about it when we get to the Q&A at the end of the session. So thank you so much.
Yep. Okay, great. Thank you, Leanne. I'm glad to see some people were awarded the grant and not awarded the grant. So this session should help you. Okay, so our session is jam-packed today. As Bill mentioned, we will include a grant overview of bike ped projects, offer you some tips and strategies to make your grant application successful, give you some resources on where to find more information. And we'd love to hear about your other issues that you talked about, or any other projects that your community is interested in pursuing, so we can help you find the grant funds. So again, please use the Q&A function, and we will either answer them through chat or we'll get to them shortly. So as part of our overview of bicycle and pedestrian grants, we'll cover both state and federal funding. I'll quickly talk about Sustainable Jersey grants. And then Christine Newman from AARP New Jersey will talk about their community challenge grants. So now I'll turn it over to Julie Seaman from the Division of Local Aid and Economic Development at the New Jersey Department of Transportation, who will talk about her division and state and federal funding. So.
Oh, good morning. Thank you, Trish. Good morning, everyone. My name is Julie Seaman. I'm from the Division of Local Aid and Economic Development, DOT. Just to touch on this, local aid's mission is to assist local public agencies in advancing their focused investments to produce successful projects. We have our district offices, there's 4, and they're strategically located throughout the state to provide guidance on our programs and their delivery. As I go through this section of the presentation, I will be highlighting several points for our programs that may interest you. The DOT has developed a resource center recently. Our resource center seeks to actually collaborate with our county and municipal representatives to enhance New Jersey's local transportation infrastructure. This commitment will strive to create a seamless transportation system where we work, live, and play to improve the quality of life for New Jersey's residents and the traveling public. And this is the actual webpage to the DOT Local Aid Resource Center itself. See, there's federally funded, state funded programs and other stage, and then also the other questions for the iBank. DOT Local Aid Resource Center was created to assist each community with project planning, grant applications, project delivery, and guidance through the federal process and more. This is always a good place to start for all DOT grant information. And there's a help desk for questions and a website with a variety of information resources. The website again is DOT Local Aid Resource Center, meant to be a place for one-stop shopping for our municipalities, LPAs, and applicants. Okay, next slide, please. Here's a little video tip that explains, our video clip, pardon me, explains more about our Local Aid Resource Center.
The Local Aid Resource Center is NJDOT's promise to help you. It's a hub for a variety of information and services for local public agencies. The Resource Center will serve New Jersey's 21 counties and 565 municipalities, as NJDOT strives to help improve mobility across the state by funding local transportation projects. Our goal is to carry out the mission of the department by assisting each community with project planning, grant applications, project delivery, guidance through the federal process, and much more. The Resource Center is the place to share ideas, celebrate successes, and learn about new tools and best practices in project delivery and engineering. We provide in-person and on-demand training, as well as customized on-site training to help you meet your needs. Multiple platforms make local aid information accessible when you need it, wherever you are. A dedicated hotline provides for yet another communication option to get information and seek help. To learn more, visit NJDOTLocalaidRC.com or call us at 609-649-9395.
Thank you very much. So the thing we want to express is consider the Local Aid Resource Center as your information hub for all of the DOT grants. It's a source for valuable information delivered for a variety of formats, accessible on multiple platforms, including social media, as she had mentioned. So on to the grant funding opportunities. When reviewing grant funding opportunities at DOT, they're actually divided into both state-funded and federally funded programs. State-funded programs are county aid, municipal aid, local aid infrastructure fund, bikeways, safe streets of transit, transit village, local bridges, and local freight impact fund. First, we'll talk about DOT's, the state funded program. The Transportation Trust Fund provides $400 million in state aid to municipalities and counties for local transportation improvements on a yearly basis. Each fiscal year, the DOT issues a solicitation announcement to municipalities, inviting them to apply for funding for their specific project needs. Applications are currently open for our FY 2022 program cycle. And actually, the programs in this cycle, they're competitive, and these programs include municipal aid, bikeways, safe streets to transit, and transit village. The deadline for these applications is July 1, 2021. If we have any county representatives interested in applying for county aid, that's not a competitive fund, that's separate. And same thing with LFIP. I'm sorry, not LFIP, the local bridges. So in each program that we just talked about, that is the municipal aid, bikeway, safe streets, and transit village, they're competitive programs. Each program has a specific focus. So applications receive points based on the criteria, including existing conditions, safety improvements, and access to public services. Other important criteria in these particular programs include the municipality special designation, such as transit village, whether the municipalities received an allotment within the last 3 years, and municipalities awarded closeout performance on previously awarded grants. An extra point is given to towns with a complete streets or complete and green streets policy. For additional information on these programs, please contact our DOT Local Aid Resource Center or your respective local aid district office. As a new requirement for this year, applicants applying for our state funded programs we just discussed will be required to utilize the PMRS to submit their resolutions. Training sessions on how to access PMRS are being held and are scheduled in June this month, on June 15th and June 17th. If you have not yet registered or taken a previous class, I suggest you visit the Resource Center and sign up for this training. Information is under our resources in a drop-down boxes under PMRS. Moving on to our federally funded programs. Federal funding programs are actually, our federal funded programs are the Safe Routes to School, Transportation Alternatives, or TA programs. We'll talk a little later about, the TA program. For now, I'd like to discuss how applicants can apply for a state or federal grant using our online application process. All of our folks, whether they're federally or state funded grants that they're applying for, have to go through the online application platform Sage. Each municipality has access to Sage, likely the administrator of the municipality has the username and the password. So check with that person first if you want to try to apply. Our municipalities and counties already have an authorized official that are registered with access to Sage from the New Jersey Department of Community Affairs, DCA, who actually runs Sage itself. If you are a school or a school district and do not have access to Sage, please contact DOT or local aid to request access or a username and password. If you do not have access to Sage and you're not representing a municipality, you can also apply as a new user online through the DOT website. Helpful links are located on the Sage homepage if you need additional help to see that they say you set your password, Sage help desk and whatnot. Or contact our DOT Local Aid Resource Center for more in-depth concerns related to Sage. So one of the things I wanted to point out as part of our, online applications this year for state programs, Sage applications, we recently launched a new mapping tool meant to enhance the grant application process. This tool is embedded in the Sage, the state-funded programs, the Sage application itself. Under one of the pages, you can start the Sage application at any time and update it as needed. Training on how to use this new tool is embedded within the state-funded application itself. So it's a little link and you just click right on it. I'll explain how to do that. So we are requiring all of our applicants to use this particular tool to provide maps. Okay. So just to kind of let you know who our partners are, or folks that you need to reach out to when you're doing our Safe Routes to School solicitation, which is now underway. This is the map of the area and the contact information available. So for our Safe Routes to School program, it's underway. The program is administered jointly by DOT and the 3 New Jersey Regional Metropolitan Planning Organizations, or MPOs. That map is on the left. The contact information is TPA on the top, the top in the blue. TPRPC is the light purple, and then SJTPO is in the darker purple. The map on the right is represents our local aid district offices. District 1 is in blue, District 2 is in purple, District 3 is in yellow, and then District 4 is in blue. These maps provide appropriate contacts if you're interested in learning more about the Safe Routes to School program, or have specific questions in general, whether it be an application or a project you're already working on. Again, our DOT local aid resource center is available to answer any questions you may have, or they'll find the appropriate person to help you. The websites that we've discussing or are discussing contain resources, including information on each grant program. So specifically, we launched our Safe Routes to School grant basically on May 25th, and the websites that we're talking about contain resources including handoff, FAQs, and a copy of our blank application. So I suggest you review these documents if you're thinking about applying for our Safe Routes to School grant. That's the first place to start. So wanted to update you on a few key dates. So at the end of May, as I had mentioned, we announced that the grant solicitation period for 2022 Safe Routes to School program is actually now open. Applications will be accepted through May 20th through October 14th. Over the next 4 months, several training sessions have been developed to aid our applicants in developing their applications. The dates and times of these 4 sessions are listed. They're actually on the previous slide. And basically they start, I think it's June 15th, and they run through September 9th, I believe it is, September 9th, yeah. So June 15th, July 13th, August 19th, and September 9th. So just please remember to pre-register for these training sessions. All of them will be taped and accessible for use after each session. Representatives from our local aid office and respective MPO will also be available to answer your grant application questions at these webinars. Please help spread the word. I highly recommend municipalities interested in applying for the Safe Routes to School funding should attend. You can register for the free webinars through our Safe Routes to School NJ.org website. Okay, so just another thing to go with the overview of our timeline for the grants. So basically, we launched May 25th, 2021 for Safe Routes. Application information webinars, they're going to be June to September. Again, we're offering one-on-one meetings that folks will be can meet and talk to a local aid district representative and get more one-on-one information on their actual application itself. And that'll run through September 17th. And then we actually close our grant on October 14th. So at this point, if you have any additional questions or on any of this opportunity, will be available at the end of the presentation for questions and answers. I will now turn over the presentation back to Trish Sanchez from the New Jersey Safe Routes to School Resource Center. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Julie. And that's a great segue, because now I'm going to give you a brief overview of the Safe Routes to School grant program. Just a little teaser. And as Julie mentioned, please sign up for our grant webinars, and then you'll get the full scoop, all the details. So, and then I'll also talk about the Transportation Alternative Set Aside federal grant. So we've got a lot to cover. Let's jump right in. Okay, so what is Safe Routes to School? Hopefully all of you know about this program by now. It's a federal, state, and local effort and creates safer conditions for walking and bicycling. Where it's safe, we want to get more children walking and biking, and where it's not safe, we want to make it safe. The program also encourages children to walk and bike to school, fostering a healthy, active lifestyle at an early age. And the objectives are to facilitate projects that will improve safety and reduce traffic, fuel consumption, and air pollution around the schools. So who's eligible to apply? The majority of applications come from municipal governments. However, counties, schools, school districts, or boards of education may also submit for the Safe Routes to School grant. This includes public, charter, and private schools, provided that the project is in the public right of way. And nonprofit entities that are responsible for administering local safety, transportation safety programs, including construction, planning, and design, are also eligible to apply. So what projects are eligible? They must, as we mentioned, facilitate walking and biking to school, and the project must be within 2 miles of a K-8 school. They must be infrastructure projects only, and the projects must be within the public right of way. So if projects are on private land, there must be a written legal easement or other legally binding agreement that ensures public access to the project. Other examples of eligible projects include bicycle safety, pedestrian safety, sorry, I'll talk about that first, like new or upgraded sidewalks, ADA curb ramps, pedestrian signals, and school zone delineation. Bicycle safety projects can include on-street and off-road bike paths and bike parking. As we know, parking is very important and often lacking in communities. And traffic calming and crosswalk treatments like curb extensions, speed tables, and pedestrian refuge islands. And there may be other eligible projects that meet the objective of improving pedestrian safety and access around schools. So the requirements of a Safe Routes to School infrastructure grant are the following, and if any of these are not met, unfortunately, the application will not be considered. So first and foremost, the application must have support. So it must include a signed and dated resolution of support for the municipality and the school board. In addition, a letter of support is needed if there are any other right-of-way owners, such as county roads and parks. A maintenance commitment is needed. This usually is from the municipality. Applicants must identify a primary point of contact, which we call the person of responsible charge, and that person must be a full-time employee, and it cannot be a consultant. As previously mentioned, the project must be located within 2 miles of a K-8 school. And one last note is in previous grant rounds, gathering the number of students walking and biking to school through student arrival and departure tallies was part of the application. However, due to COVID, student tallies are not required for this grant application. And instead, grant award recipients will be required to submit tallies upon notification of grant approval. So it's important to know when you're applying for the Safe Routes to School infrastructure grant that extra consideration is given to towns with adopted complete streets policies and to school districts with supportive walk and bike to school policies that also support the Safe Routes to School program. School districts or municipalities that have been awarded New Jersey Safe Routes Recognition Certification at the gold, silver, and bronze levels will get extra consideration. And we just announced our winners on Monday from the 2021 year. So take a look at those on our website, and congratulations to those folks. And of course, school travel or bicycle pedestrian plans that include the project will be given extra consideration. So the more you can show support through planning efforts and programs that encourage walking and bicycling, the stronger they'll be. And furthermore, the location is very important. So if there will be equity considerations that apply, and I'll explain more about that in the selection criteria. So now I'm going to briefly go over the Federal Transportation Alternatives, or TA set-aside program funds. And again, please use the QA function if you have any questions, and we'll get to them shortly. So what's the purpose of the TA set-aside grants? This program awards community-based transportation projects for either land or water that expand travel choice, strengthen the local economy, improve safety and quality of life, and or protect the environment. So similar to the Safe Routes to School grant, TA set-aside applications mostly come from municipal governments. However, there are other eligible entities that can apply, such as schools and school districts, regional transportation authorities like the Port Authority or PATCO, transit agencies, natural resource or public land agencies, tribal governments, nonprofit organizations familiar with all aspects of road construction, including project management, and any other local or regional government entity with responsibility for oversight of transportation, other than an MPO or a state agency. So what's an eligible project? The facilities must be surface transportation oriented for land or water. So they can't be solely for recreational purposes. So for example, if it's an off-road trail, if that's eligible for funding, but it should be a transportation facility that is multi-use and connects destinations. Transport by water encompasses canals, docks, and piers connecting to ferry operations. Proposals must be for complete, identifiable, and usable facilities or activities. And they're not available for partial projects. So if those projects cannot function as a complete and useful activity, they won't be eligible. So, and projects must meet the criteria for at least one out of the following 7 categories. So the projects must fall into number 1, design and construction of on-road and off-road trail facilities for pedestrians, bicyclists, and other non-motorized forms of transportation. Conversion and use of abandoned railroad corridors for trails for pedestrians, bicyclists, and other non-motorized transportation users. Construction of scenic turnouts, overlooks, and viewing areas. Historic preservation and rehabilitation of historic transportation facilities, both land and water, such as building structures and canals. Community improvement activities, specifically streetscaping and corridor landscaping. Environmental mitigation to address stormwater management, control, and water pollution and prevention or abatement related to highway construction or due to highway runoff. And 7, reduce vehicle-caused wildlife mortality and to restore and maintain connectivity among terrestrial or aquatic habitats. So each category includes eligible activities, and for more specific information, you can find it on the Local Aid website, Local Aid Resource Center website. So let's talk about eligible costs. This applies for both Safe Routes and TA set-aside grants. Project costs eligible include design, right-of-way acquisition, and construction. Applicants are encouraged to utilize their own funds or local funds to pay for pre-construction activities such as preliminary design, final design, right-of-way, and environmental documentation. However, a design assistance program is available for some grantees. It's important to note that costs for construction inspection should also be identified separately if those funds are desired. So project costs that are not eligible for funding include administrative costs, miscellaneous contingencies, utility relocation costs, and uniform traffic directors unless required by design. So for project selection, for both the federal grants, each application is reviewed by a selection committee and on-site by NJDOT staff. So applications will be evaluated using an established program criteria of a 25-point rating system. And each project will be assessed based solely on the content of the application and all the attachments. So there are several ways the rating system can give extra points to your application. You can receive extra consideration if your municipality has adopted a complete streets policy, or if the project is located in special designated areas like the New Jersey Department of Community Affairs targeted urban municipalities, TUMs, or opportunity zones. Construction ready projects will be given higher consideration. And again, location of the project is important. Grant applications will be reviewed for deliberate and actionable considerations of equity in underserved communities. So consideration will be given to applications that provide additional benefits to communities identified in the following categories: Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, environmental justice communities, limited English proficiency populations, and individuals with disabilities. Census data will also be used to determine if a project meets this equity criteria, and the following data sets listed here will be used. As an applicant, you will not be required to show or map the census data. Just know that DOT will be looking at these factors and equity considerations as part of the review of each proposal. If you have multiple projects you are considering, choose the project located in the section of your town that has the greatest needs. So here's an overview of the federal grant life cycle. There are 5 stages to the process, and please be aware that completion of all these 5 stages may take several years. However, projects must receive authorization or completion of stage 3 before proceeding. So this includes demonstration that the necessary permits, approvals, and environmental clearances will be obtained within that time period. So although the current solicitation is not open for TA set aside, now is a great time to start considering a project for this next round of funding. So now we're going to review some grant strategies for applying for DOT grants. Pick the correct program for your project, obviously based on timing, but also base it on the scale and the cost. Review those NJDOT grant handbooks online. They're available on saferoots.nj.org and also the local aid resource center website. And they're a great source of information, and they list application guidance and selection criteria. And make sure your proposal meets the grant criteria. So be thorough. Ratings are based on the content of your application. Don't assume the raters know the project or the location. DOT will spot check these projects, so your application must stand on its own. And include photos and maps identifying issues and safety concerns. Use photos to highlight them and include people in your photos to help show the safety story and why your project is needed. So here I am trying to figure out how I'm going to long jump over this big puddle. And then here's a need for a sidewalk because of it's basically gravel. And then here you can see that this mother and daughter and other people are walking along the highway with no sidewalk. So be sure to include information such as letters of support, resolutions, maintenance commitments, stuff I just mentioned earlier, because if this is not included, the application will not be considered. Indicate construction readiness level. If your project is construction ready, has the right permitting, right of way, utilities are in order, then your project will be stronger. Assess your ability to administer a federal project and prepare accordingly. Federal projects are attractive because of the amount of funding available, but they also require a significant amount of time to authorize the project well before construction. And lastly, a few don'ts to add to the list. These are mistakes past applicants have made. Please don't make these mistakes. Don't submit a completed or partially completed project because your project will not be reimbursed if it's already begun. So if you already started construction, you won't be reimbursed. Please don't propose a project on a county road without talking to the county. Make sure you get your letter of support from them. Don't propose something that goes against current design standards. They must comply with ADA standards. Don't propose a sidewalk without accompanying safe street crossings. And don't propose a project in a neighborhood where residents have protested against it. Projects that can show community support will have higher ratings. So think about costs because federal grants are designed for bigger projects, but don't apply if your total cost for the project is under $300,000. If you're thinking about your projects and realizing you need help creating a larger bicycle or pedestrian plan, please keep in mind that the New Jersey Department of Transportation Bureau of Safety, Bicycle and Pedestrian Programs offers planning technical assistance through their local technical assistance program. And their office has funded over 100 plans in towns throughout the state. And they have on-call consultants who are paired with your town to help create the process and plan to improve conditions for walking and bicycling. So if you're interested in learning more, please email bikeped@dot.nj.gov. And this is a list of resources that can help guide municipalities on planning, on policy and design that can address walking and bicycling, including several guides that are specific to New Jersey. So these are just a few resources, but show your commitment to safety. Applying requires more than just some new striping. and a few signs. Consider designs that will make a real impact on the safety of people walking and bicycling. So these resources can be found on the URL listed at the DOT website, and of course they're also on the saferoutesnj.org website. Okay, so now we're done with the federal grants. So please put questions in chat and we'll get back to you shortly. And now I'm going to talk about smaller, more attainable funds that can be used to make your community more walkable and bikeable. So Sustainable Jersey is a voluntary sustainable certification program for New Jersey municipalities and schools, and they provide smaller grants. And the program is designed to move municipalities and schools towards a sustainable future through completion of actions. It also provides access to grant funding, and that's through their sponsors such as PSE&G and NJDOT. So the Sustainable Jersey grants are smaller, $2,000 for green team grants, $10,000 to $35,000 for larger grants, and they have awarded over $6 million in grant funding since 2009 when the program kicked off. In addition, they have a new searchable funding database that can help you find the right grant based on the action you want to complete. And there are several Sustainable Jersey actions that address safety for people walking, rolling, and bicycling. So if you're enrolled in the Sustainable Jersey program, these are a number of actions that can support walking and biking, such as adopting policies for completing green streets, safe routes to school, and anti-idling. And as a little bit of a disclosure, I used to serve on the selection committee for the schools program several years ago. And there were very few grant applications for walk and bike actions. So your chances may still be very high if you apply for some of these actions. Sustainable Jersey grants may be smaller, but they cover a host of eligible costs, such as staff salaries and stipends, consultant and contractor fees, equipment like bike racks and helmets, promotional items, and educational materials. And the grants are offered 2 times per year for municipalities and schools, and all applications are online through their website. So now I'm going to turn the presentation over to Christine Newman, and she's the Director of Community Outreach at AARP New Jersey, and she's going to talk about community challenge grants to make communities more walkable and bikeable and livable. So turn it over to you, Christine.
Thank you so much, Trish. Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. I'm so pleased to have this opportunity to share a little information with you about AARP's National Community Challenge Grant. Just by way of quick background, AARP is the nation's largest nonprofit, nonpartisan organization, really dedicated to empowering the 50+ to choose how they live as they age. Our Challenge Grant program is part of our National Livable Community Strategy. The grant program launched in 2017. So we are currently in our 5th year cycle. Our 5th year cycle actually just closed last month. And really what we're focused on is how do we help make communities great places to live at any age? If we could go to the next slide, please. So really what that means is, how do we move from communities that foster images such as this, right? They bring up ideas of like disconnection, social isolation, lack of that connectivity. And how do we help move to, if we could go to the next slide, please, this. Environments that really foster the sense of walkability, inclusivity, and really just help support the creation of vibrant places for social interconnection. Next slide, please. So really at the heart of the Challenge Grant program, I will say, is this idea that small, quick action projects can really spur long-term change. Our grant cycle typically opens end of February, early March. Winners are notified about mid-June, so right about now actually. And then projects have to be completed and wrapped up by early to mid-November. So again, it is a very sort of discrete time period here. AARP does prioritize projects that not only deliver inclusive solutions, but as well as those that directly engage volunteers in a variety of different realms. So it could be around projects that create vibrant public places, improvements to parks and open spaces, projects that deliver on a range of transportation and mobility options to help increase walkability, connectivity, wayfinding, and bikeability in a community. Projects that support a variety of housing options to help increase the availability of both affordable and accessible housing options in a community. Projects that help foster civic engagement. You know, how do we bring residents and local leaders together to address challenges and really facilitate the sense of inclusion. And then additionally, in the last 2 years, the program has been expanded to also support projects that help with local recovery from the coronavirus pandemic. I will say specifically with an emphasis on sort of economic development, improvements of public spaces and transportation. And then projects that really ensure a focus on diversity and inclusion while improving the built environment. Project types can be permanent, so these can be permanent physical improvements in the community. They can also be temporary demonstrations that then lead to long-term change. Projects can also be new or innovative programming or services. What the grant does not fund is the funding of existing annual programming. So there has to be some sort of new element or expansion of programming. It is open to all nonprofits as well as government entities. It is not open to for-profit entities. If we go to the next slide, please. And just to kind of give you a little bit of an idea about the assessment criteria. So each applicant is assessed on 3 main areas: impact, execution, and innovation. Impact is rated the most heavily at 65 points, execution at 25, and innovation at 10. And really under impact, this is the meat of how are you addressing a clear need in the community, and how will this project bring positive direct change, and really show how this can help overcome barriers. Execution really is that idea about knowing this is a discrete time period. Does the application speak to scope matching that timeline? You know, can what's outlined in the grant be done in the amount of time, and all the deliverables in the amount of time that this grant cycle covers? And then lastly, innovation. You know, really, how does this project either engage unique design elements to help contribute to impact, or how is it creative and different? If we could go to the next slide, please. Just to give you sort of a snapshot of our grants, you know, sort of since its inception in 2017. So to date, we've given out over $6 million to a total of 560 grantees nationwide. Last year, 2020 was our largest grant cycle to date. We gave out over $2.4 million to 184 communities. And while there is no set range for our grants, you know, we don't have a min or a max level communities can ask for. I will say the average tends to be around like the $12,000 to $18,000 range. And then you can see here sort of the scope and breakdown of what projects typically are funded. So, you know, throughout this grant's history, we see about 60% of projects really falling into that public spaces realm. So making improvements to parks and gathering places. And then definitely the second largest area of work and focus is around transportation. So increasing connectivity, walkability, bikeability, and safety in communities. If we could go to the next slide, please. So I just wanted to give a few examples of some of the grantees here in New Jersey, especially around the bikeability, walkability space. You can sort of get a taste and a flavor for some of these projects. So 2019, the Township of Teaneck received a challenge grant. And this really was focused on putting in some additional walkway safety measures, but specifically in targeted areas that had been identified by community members in a community walk audit that had been done previously. So the community had come together, done this walk audit, really clearly identified and articulated, you know, where these safety improvements needed to happen. And so then the challenge grant funding was used to implement that. If we could go to the next slide, please. So this is an example from last year in Trenton. So the Trenton Health team actually received a grant to pilot a bike share program specifically focused on older adults in the community. So older adults, were the first to utilize this bike share program, provide their feedback with the idea that then this pilot could lead to future rollout of a much larger citywide bike share program, but really having older adults in the driver's seat of that pilot. And then if we can go to the next slide, please. This last example is also from last year, and this is from Metuchen. So the Metuchen Downtown Alliance, which is a partner we work with regularly around issues of livability, had actually received funding for what they called their new streetery. So this was a closed streets initiative, really involved the creation of parklets, the expansion of outdoor dining and retail space, but specifically focused on helping with the economic recovery of the downtown from the COVID-19 pandemic. So allowing additional space for social distancing, but for people to still come down and enjoy and participate and take part in the downtown. All of the examples I just shared ranged from approximately $12,000 to about $23,000 in terms of the grants that were given out. And if we could go to the next slide, please. Just to wrap up, I kind of just wanted to share some of my thoughts around the projects that we've seen funded, and sort of what I see is some of those what we call secret sauce elements, right, when you're putting together these grant applications. And I would say by far number one is this idea of community engagement, and Trish talked about this as well. How does the grant specifically address the community leading and driving this? So this idea of this should be do with community, not do to community. And then part of that, really, how are volunteers and older adults involved in leading that process? Besides that, I would say, how does this project then either connect to other issues that in your community of livability or equity? How does it help drive sustainability moving forward or drive a larger goal or impact? Having that very clearly defined, really is a marker for success here. And then lastly, I'd say again, because this is a defined, pretty much 5-month quick action project, really making sure that in the application, your deliverables match and align to the timeline. It's a targeted scope of project that can realistically be done within that time frame. And then if we can just go to the final slide, please. So just wanted to share here, this is the website arp.org/community challenge. Like I said, our grant cycle just closed. We anticipate our 2021 awardees to be announced pretty much in the next couple weeks. But our cycle does open every year, end of February, early March. And this is the website where you can go to find out all the information, FAQs, download the application and submit as well. So I think I will leave it there and I'll turn it back over to you, Trish.
Thank you, Christine. On to the next slide. So before we open for Q&A, I just want to quickly mention some resources to assist with the Safe Routes programs and funding. One of our best resources is free technical assistance. New Jersey has 8 regional transportation management associations that are funded by the New Jersey Department of Transportation, and they cover all 21 counties in the state. And they have staff within these TMAs that can help with walking and bicycling initiatives and events, assist with complete streets policies, and helping develop school travel plans. So they really are a tremendous resource, and reach out to them for their assistance. And of course, a nice plug for our Safe Routes Resource Center. We do have a website that has a tremendous amount of information for grant funding, including estimating improvement costs, engineering design solutions, lots of model policies, lots of stuff. So check out our website. And then here's a list of all the resource websites from our presentations today. So at this time, we'll take some questions, some Q&A. So again, please use the Q&A feature to ask your question. And I think I'm going to turn it over to Leanne, who's monitoring it.
Okay. Thanks. Well, thank you, everybody who was a panelist. I know it was a lot of information to go through, and I was trying to get to everybody's questions as quick as possible as they were asked in the Q&A. So thank you for everybody who submitted questions. We did get a few questions during registration. So I'm going to start with those, and then we'll move on from there. So we actually got this a couple different ways, and this goes both to Julie and Christine. So Julie and Christine, you can turn your cameras back on to help answer these questions.
All right, what's up?
Okay, so one of the questions that came in for both programs, and you kind of covered it, but maybe you could explain a little bit more, is just how competitive are these grants? So Julie first, what would you say that for safe routes or transportation alternatives set aside?
They're both very competitive programs. So the federal programs are both very competitive. The requests far outweigh, or the needs far outweigh the actual allotment amounts were provided on the at the time frame we're running the solicitation. My recommendation is definitely, as a first step, if you're really seriously thinking about applying for either one of these programs, is to look at that handbook. That's the first step. We also provide blank applications out there on the website. They're actually the SAGE applications are printed, and they're actually put directly up there for applicants to actually take a serious look and not go into SAGE itself, because it can be onerous at times. But it gives you a snapshot of all the things that we're looking for. So I definitely think we should start, looking at that too. There's some certain things that we look for: resolutions of support, for instance, from the owner of the public right-of-way, maintenance commitments. It takes a fair amount of time to get that information together. So that would be the first step. The state aid is is equally competitive as well. Municipal aid is somewhat more county driven where you are in the state, but the bikeways and safe streets of transit village. Again, think about, look at the actual requirements each application lays out. That's important.
So Christine, how about you? I know
Yeah,
you did cover it a bit.
I think so. Our program is also only 5 years in. So from what I've seen over the last 5 years, what I can say is we've consistently seen each year an increase in number of applicants. So our first year, I think we had about 30, then we sort of went to like 40, 70. And then in this last cycle, we had about 130. So, as our program grows, we're having more people apply. I will say in New Jersey, our state winners each year has also gone up. So the first year we had 1 from New Jersey. The next year we had 3. Last year, I think we had 4. So it is absolutely competitive. And as we grow, though, what I'm seeing is, as across the country, the program grows, the number of awardees each year is increasing as well. I think one of the things here, though, is, you don't always have to reinvent the wheel for all of these. There's elements of our challenge grant that are probably very similarly aligned to some of the other opportunities that Julie and Trish talked about. So thinking strategically about, where you put your focus and energy in applying, but then also realizing that you probably don't have to reinvent the wheel and, start from scratch on some of these projects. It's just, how do you kind of refine it to meet, like in our case, right, the timeline being much smaller. Is there maybe a piece of another application that you could use for ours instead? So, not having to start from scratch every time.
Yeah. Is there anything applicants can do, preparing for their applications well ahead of time? What would you say is a first step before you even get to the funding level for either or both of yours? So Julie, first, what would you?
So I think it's very important. I was listening to one of the other sessions, I believe it was yesterday, about Vision Zero, and an individual, one of the panelists had actually mentioned somebody had actually, they had suffered a death in the area. So that's the first thing. That's important. So, folks that are interested at parties, that's number one. Number two, I would try to start reaching out into the community first and find out if there's other folks that are like you or like-minded folks. But number three, I would start as a beginning to start talking to folks like our Safe Routes to School or New Jersey Safe Routes group here, Rutgers Vorhees Transportation. They are advocates. I would also, if it's not necessarily just this particular type of issue that you want to move forward with or you're passionate about, I'd look to try to find other advocates that have developed groups together that have a better handle on what's required to actually get there. And then thirdly, once you have an idea in mind, I would start looking at the actual grant sources available. For instance, ours, which are more like state and transportation related, or other funding sources that lady had brought up, pardon me. That Christina mentioned, because they're important as well, but it's just to start off and try to find like-minded or groups that will help you actually flesh out what your concerns are and put them into real time and actually help you with some of the requirements. We have a lot of federal strings that are attached to some of our programs.
Okay, so we had a couple questions that kind of came in. I tried to answer them a little bit, but
Trish, I'll answer. Did you have something, Christine, to answer or add to that, or?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, Christine. Did I step on?
I was just going to say community listening would absolutely be a first step before you apply for any of these grants, right? I think we all sort of have in our own organizations what we think the problem is, and then sometimes when you start talking to other people, you realize maybe like you only have one piece or lens to this. And so that community listening and really understanding, what are the key issues, who should be at the table, who can help drive this work, that is absolutely your base building before applying for any of these grants, I think.
Yeah, I know. I feel like sometimes people get inspired to apply for the grant only when they see the grant, but I know any sort of pre-work you can do to be prepared now helps tremendously, so you're not sort of pulling it together in the future. I actually went to a meeting once where they were well on their way to pulling the application together when they said, so what should we apply for?
Right.
Yeah.
Right, you've got to start with a clear, defined need first.
Yeah.
Well, and the other thing is, I don't know that our grants, whether they be municipal aid or or state aid, type programs, on the the DOT, the transportation side, you don't change that much. So they're not really, the whole focus doesn't completely change. So the application from cycle to cycle doesn't change. So if you want to look at our 2020 TA set aside, for instance, it might not be open right now, but it's not going to change too much. So take a look at that handbook, that resource. Think about, we just talked about, Christine did mention about the public, also visioning. If you need a little additional help and trying to flesh that out, maybe there are consultants or something like that available in your municipality, or somebody that can help you kind of put that thought to paper, you know what I mean? So that's the
Right. And Trish mentioned the DOT offers bicycle and pedestrian planning assistance to municipalities. And so that's a really good way to prioritize what needs to be funding and chunk it up in reasonable pieces so that piece can go into the application. And the other thing that often happens is through our transportation management associations, or TMAs. They work on school travel plans. And again, you can take the school travel plans they do and use those pieces to prioritize what you're going to apply for funding.
And I think that discussion about the local technical assistance, that's actually run through Bill Riviere's bike ped group, correct?
Yes.
So, yep.
Yes. Bill, you can jump in if you want to say a few words about the local planning assistance. Oh,
Local planning assistance is a great program. We're always happy to have applications. It's a rolling deadline, and for more information, you could go ahead and email the bike ped mailbox at DOT or me personally, and we'll get you that.
Thanks, Bill. One question came in beforehand and one during the session that kind of had the same question in it, but we were asked slightly different ways. But what about more, quote, temporary or tactical urbanism, or pilot projects? What's the best funding for that, like a pop-up bike lane or a parklet? Do you have any recommendations for those kind of grants?
our challenge grant funds a lot of tactical urbanism, pop-up creative placemaking projects. You know, it can go for either permanent or temporary. And I will say again, given the time frame, a lot of projects we see are sort of these, we want to trial this, we want to try it out for a couple months, do, you know, some pop-up maybe bike lanes to then see, you know, kind of like concept tests, right? The idea before we do something permanent. So you know, that's definitely in the heart of our challenge grant program.
Great. And I will say Sustainable Jersey as well does fund those as well. So make sure you go to their website. We have like a minute left. Trish, did you have anything? Or are there any, and I know there was a question about right-of-way acquisition and eligible costs, but I know that's a much deeper dive question. So I know, Denise, if you could reach out directly to DOT, I think they could help you with that one, because that gets into a lot more technical that I know you know how to you know, I know you have very specific questions about that, and I appreciate that. And I know that right-of-way issues with DOT grants is a big question. So if others have that question too, we'll have to follow up later. But Trish, do you have any closing words?
Yes, I do. Thank you, everybody, for participating today. So I just wanted to share our contact information. So thank you again for attending our final Safe Routes Academy session. We do have more, there are more bike walk sessions today and tomorrow. And thank you to the New Jersey Department of Transportation for sponsoring the Academy. And when the session ends, you'll be prompted to take a short feedback survey. So we really appreciate you taking the time to fill that out. Look forward to your responses. So thanks again for joining us, and have a great weekend.